16th of November 2011. RFB. If you don't know what RFB stands for, I highly suggest you do a Google search. No, it isn't a type of rifle, since that's what Google will come up with for you. In medicine, RFB stands for rectal foreign body. I'm constantly amazed at what people will insert in their rectums far enough that they can't retrieve it. About 2 years ago, I was asked to see a guy who had this impacted in his rectum. Fortunately for him, I was able to grasp it with a surgical clump and take it back out the way it went in. Another gentleman came to the ER complaining of severe abdominal pain, and on questioning him, he admitted to putting this in his rectum. Why did he do that, you ask? He was preparing for a fisting party. Yeah, preparing for a fisting party. He managed to perforate his colon and required a colostomy. My favourite story will be familiar to anyone who has viewed my profile on fmylife.com. I got called to the ER to see a guy who had something stuck up there. The nurses were all snickering about it when I arrived. Did you hear about the guy in room 15? I walked into the room and after I introduced myself, he said, "Doc, I'm not gay, but my wife is out of town with the kids and I did a stupid thing." Yes, he did. Here is his x-ray. After I told him that I wasn't interested in his personal affairs, he pulled these out of his bag. He told me that he figured there was a vacuum behind the bottle that wasn't allowing him to remove it himself, so he had used this bit to drill a hole in the bottom of another bottle. He then handed me the drill bit, and a spare bit, just in case the first one broke, as he expected me to drill a hole in the glass bottle in his rectum. "Sir," I said, "I assure you, I will not be drilling a hole in the bottle." I took him to the operating room and put him to sleep, and when the muscle relaxants kicked in, his rectum and anus relaxed enough for me to get the bottle back out the way it went in. He signed himself out of the recovery room, and I never heard from him again. 20th of November 2011. Losing patients. I lost a patient today. Losing patients suck. I've lost 2 this week. One of them was nearly dead by the time I was consulted on him, and he ended up finishing himself shortly after I operated on him. The second one went well, but despite the fact that we did everything right, he still bled to death. Life isn't really fair sometimes. I've taken care of some scumbag gangbangers who got shot in the chest and survived, and this hard-working family man suffered an injury that could have been survivable, but he died. I can't tell you how many patients I've lost, and you may think I'd become immune to it after a while, but each and every one stings like hell. 22nd of November 2011. Don't bull me. Disclaimer, I will probably look like a pompous ass in this post. I've said before that I don't claim to be the smartest guy in the world, but after 4 years of college, 2 years of graduate school, 4 years of medical school and 5 years of surgery training, I think it's safe to say that people like me are some of the more highly educated people in society. There are some other very highly educated people in the world as well, PhDs, lawyers, educators, pharmacists, dentists, etc., but that doesn't give them any insight into medicine or physiology. Some highly educated people just don't seem to get that. A patient of mine introduced himself as Dr. Such and Such, not his real name, so I naturally assumed he was a medical doctor. Now, my conversations with other physicians are on an entirely separate plane as compared to non-physicians, because there's a reasonable assumption of medical knowledge no matter what the field. Even a psychiatrist knows most surgical jargon. This guy nodded and went along with me through my whole talk with him about his condition. When I was done, I asked him if he had any questions. Just one. "What did you just say?" Turns out the guy isn't a doctor at all. He has a PhD in mathematics. He's a smart guy, don't get me wrong, and I would have no problem calling this guy Dr. Such and Such if I were a student in his class as a sign of respect for someone in his position. But I'm sorry. If you're a PhD, you do not introduce yourself as a doctor to another doctor whenever you're the patient. I don't think of myself as better than this guy, but that's nothing short of arrogance. I've had chiropractors pull the same bull with me. Chiropractors are not doctors, despite their DC tag that they give themselves. When I've been a patient, I've introduced myself as my first name. If the subject comes up, I'll tell the doctor that I'm a physician as well. That allows us to communicate a lot easier. But when I'm a patient, I'm a patient. When you're my patient, don't bull me. 20th of November 2011. 2 beers. 2 beers. It's always 2 beers. How much did you have to drink tonight, sir? Idiot patient who reeks of alcohol? 2 beers. It's almost always 2 drinks. No one ever admits to getting plastered, but everyone feels the need to lie to a doctor in order to look better, I suppose. Even when I tell them that I'm not the police and that we're getting a blood test so I can see their exact blood alcohol level, they continue to lie. Same goes for drug users. People readily admit to using marijuana, but no one likes to admit to using heroin or pills or cocaine. People on PCP are too doped up and stupid to admit anything. Look, people, I'm just the guy trying to take care of you. If you've hurt someone, you better believe I'm going to find the police and make sure that they know about you. But I'm trying to make you better, and lying to me isn't helping. 30th of November 2011. Good saves. Okay, I'll apologise in advance. There will be no stupid stories today and no stupid patients. Today is all about great saves. I'll start by saying that 95% of all my trauma patients do not end up needing surgery by me. They may need orthopedic surgery, hand surgery, plastic surgery, etc., but the vast majority do not have life-threatening injuries. Those that do often do poorly, but every now and then I have what I consider a good save. Someone who may well have died if not for my intervention. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. Okay, maybe I am a little. Last night I got 2 trauma patients at once, a woman who had T-boned another car and the driver of the other car as well. Neither was seriously injured. The husband of the first woman was sitting in the back seat during the accident, but he wasn't brought in as a trauma patient. He walked in and started complaining of some chest pain. He was immediately upgraded to trauma, and a CT scan of his chest and abdomen showed a fracture of his sternum, the breastbone, as well as some blood in his abdomen and evidence of active arterial bleeding from the mesentery, the blood supplied to the bowel. He was initially stable, but his blood pressure began to drop even though I transfused 4 units of blood. I took him to the operating room, where I found a small bowel laceration and 5 litres of blood in his abdomen due to 2 large lacerations of the mesentery with active arterial bleeding. I got the bleeding under control, repaired the mesentery, and repaired the small bowel laceration all in under an hour. This morning, he is awake, alert, his vital signs are all completely normal, and his blood counts are also normal and stable. My best save is from about 3 years ago. A young woman was shot in the abdomen by her ex-boyfriend while she was holding her 2-year-old daughter. Her parents were also both shot, but they were okay. I took her to the operating room where I repaired her diaphragm, repaired her liver, repaired 2 holes in her stomach, removed the tail of her pancreas, and removed her left kidney. She essentially walked out of the hospital about 2 weeks later. I've seen her in my office several times over the past 3 years, and she's doing great. She's remarried and back to work full time. This is why I do trauma. It isn't to take care of the idiot drunk driver who puts everyone around him at risk, or the criminal who gets shot in a shootout with police. It's to take care of these innocent victims and get them back to their normal lives. That's what makes it all worth it. 1st of December 2011. Reality versus fantasy. Have you ever noticed how people die immediately after getting shot or stabbed, or they have their last few gasps before saying the name of their killer, or "Avenge me!" or something equally dramatic and stupid? And have you ever noticed that the people who don't die immediately after getting shot just need to have the bullet removed so that everything is okay? They can go to a back alley doctor or a veterinarian or anyone with a pair of pliers, and as soon as that nasty bullet is extracted, everyone sighs a big sigh of relief because he'll be okay. Well, I have some bad news for you. TV and movies are not reality. This shouldn't come as a shock to you, but it does to everyone else. You see, I usually don't remove bullets from people who have been shot. Once they go through you, the damage is done. After it stops moving, if it's still inside you, it doesn't do anything. It just sits there. There is simply no reason to remove it unless the police really needed to help find the shooter. Make sense? It seems to be common sense to me. However, whenever I tell this to someone, they look at me like I'm crazy. You're not going to remove the bullet? No, I'm not. Oh my god, why not? I tried to explain what I just said above, but they still look at me like I've got 2 green heads with antlers. Removing the bullet usually does more harm than good. Digging around for it can damage the surrounding tissues, and there's no benefit to removing it anyway. Don't even get me started on the TV show House and all the mistakes they make. 4th of December 2011. Alcohol. I like a drink or two every now and then. I'm a big fan of Belgian ales and dark stouts, but I know when enough is enough, and I would never be stupid enough to drink and drive. Unfortunately, that's not the only activity that one can do while drinking that can get one into trouble. I've had 3 very intoxicated patients just in the past 3 hours all get injured by different mechanisms. One guy with a blood alcohol level of 0.47 walked into a bus. He walked into a bus. He was fine. Another guy with an alcohol level of 0.39 was hit by a car. Also fine. A third guy with an alcohol level of 0.27 fell down the stairs. Again, no injuries except a broken shoulder blade. The kicker here is that he weighs, according to him, about 600 pounds, or roughly 272 kilograms. So doing the math and considering his size, he had to have approximately 30 drinks in an hour to get his blood alcohol level that high. What the hell is wrong with people? 23rd of December 2011. Mechanism of injury. Trauma by mechanism is my least favourite phrase I hear in my trauma bay. That just means that the mechanism of injury ought to be severe enough to cause some harm, even if the patient is found walking around the scene of the accident with no complaints whatsoever. If the EMT deems that the mechanism is severe enough, that patient will be called a trauma and it'll drop into my lap. Don't misunderstand me, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the emergency response personnel. They save lives, they get people to the hospital quickly, and they do some amazing things. But I've met a few who aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. I always try to keep in mind that these hardworking people are not doctors. I can usually assess someone and determine if that person is critically ill and or will need surgery in about 15 seconds. But I've had over 9 years of formal, rigorous medical training, so it's an apples to rutabaga comparison. The emergency medical technicians have to make a judgment when they first get on the scene. Is this person injured to the point of requiring an evaluation by a trauma surgeon, or can we take him to the ER where he or she will likely sit in the waiting room for 3 or 4 hours before an ER physician can do the initial evaluation? It's doubtless a difficult determination, but in some cases it should be much easier than others, and sometimes they just make boneheaded decisions. The ambulance dropped off a patient this past week after he was in a car accident. He was wearing a seatbelt when he lost control and the car rolled over. He didn't lose consciousness, he was able to get out of the car by himself, and he had no complaints whatsoever when EMS arrived. They still slapped a cervical collar on him, strapped him to a backboard and shipped him to me. I discharged him about 10 minutes later, no doubt with a headache and frustration of being sent to the hospital for no damn reason. Even worse was a lady whose car was hit on the passenger side, again wearing her seatbelt. She appeared to have no injuries, and indeed when I asked her, she had no pain at all. I asked the EMT why she was called a trauma, and he told me it was by mechanism of a head-on collision. I tried to explain that she was T-boned, not hit head-on. He told me that it was trauma by mechanism. My blood started boiling. Of the other car involved, not hers. She was actually upgraded to a trauma based on the amount of damage to the car that hit her car, which was minimally damaged. I had to control my rage, or else he would have been my next trauma patient after I kicked him in the shin. I discharged her about 10 minutes later too. 29th of December 2011. Self-inflicted. Self-inflicted trauma is some of the worst. These poor people are trying to kill themselves, and I'm trying to prevent them from getting their wish. I've seen self-inflicted gunshot wounds and stab wounds, people who try to slash their wrists or thighs. Don't try this, it never works. Drowning, and several jumpers. It's always sad, but this next kid was one of the saddest ones. The call came in a few days ago as a self-inflicted stab wound, a level 1 trauma, the most severe kind. A patient that has a good chance of dying any second. The preliminary report from the ambulance was a young man who stabbed himself in the abdomen 5 times. Oh boy. A few minutes later, in rolls a 17-year-old kid with tears running down his cheeks and his hands cuffed behind him. Uh-oh, that's never good. The police accompanying him described it thusly. He got into an altercation with another person, and he decided instead of arguing, stabbing the other guy would be a good thing to do. Dumb idea number 1. The police were notified, and when they showed up, he ran. Dumb idea number 2. When they caught up to him, he decided to just end it all rather than go to jail. Dumb idea 3. When I actually examined him, he had only managed to nick his skin 5 times. That was it, no deeper injuries. I sent him for a psychiatric evaluation before he went off to police custody. I always feel sorry for these people, because obviously something has gone terribly wrong in their lives. But I'm sorry, you're not dying on my watch. 30th of December 2011. Last night. Truth is stranger than fiction. Have I said that before? Well, it's true. I can't make up some of these stories, I'm just not creative enough. 3 of my 4 trauma patients from overnight deserve special attention here. The first is a 16-year-old kid who was skateboarding at midnight, in freezing temperatures, in the woods. How the hell does one skateboard in the woods? Poorly, apparently. He fell and hit his head, and he fractured his skull and bled into his brain. He will most likely be fine, but chalk it up to the stupidity of youth. The next patient was around 1 AM, a young motorcyclist who passed several cars on the interstate like they were standing still. A few minutes later, they came upon his motorcycle lying in the middle of the highway on fire. He was found about 75 feet away, pulseless and not breathing. He stayed that way, unfortunately. Coincidentally, and quite amazingly, I actually saw him in my trauma bay about 2 years ago after he'd had a much more minor motorcycle accident. It seems he failed to learn anything from his past experience, and he paid the ultimate price. The final patient deserves a special spot here because he's a double whammy. Dumb patient, dumber paramedic. A woman brought her 25-year-old husband to the fire station after he deliberately cut his forearm. They took a look at his abdomen and saw some fluid coming out, so they thought he had stabbed himself in the abdomen also. Had they actually asked him what it was, they would have easily found out that he had had an abscess there about 8 months ago which was lanced, and he had been draining a bit of pus ever since. When I told this to the paramedic, he actually said, "I'm gonna leave now before I feel any more stupid," and he walked out. But here's the really strange part. I saw a lot of dried red stuff in his forearm, all around his scratches. That's all they were, scratches. "It's just blood, doc," I hear you all screaming. No, it was actually hot sauce that he had poured on the scratches so he could feel the pain. Hot sauce.